All right, welcome everybody to the live stream here. We're going to do some news topics. We do this every week, Wednesdays at 5 p.m. And we got Gen Z BTC, Dan from Bitcoin Reactions, and today we're joined by Josh from WorkSafe Bitcoin. And we might have some other Bitcoiners hop into the stream as well. I've just created a Bitcoin YouTuber chat and thrown the link out there, so it might be a nice surprise. Didn't know Josh was going to be here for sure, so it's just gonna kind of be rotating throughout the week, throughout the stream. Whoever's available, whoever wants to come in and talk about what's going on. So I think the big one here, guys, for news story of the week is the price. So here we have an article. This is even outdated at this point, but Bitcoin drops to 74,000 before rebounding as cryptocurrencies join global market. So this is interesting, and maybe we'll share this tab too. Even today, right? The crazy price action. Like, what is even going on, right? We had this kind of double bottom here, potentially 74, right? And we had this massive spike up, incredible volume I'm on the hourly chart. So just lots of trading volume going on, lots of price action. Everything's kind of rebounded today. A lot of this is tariff driven, but what do you guys think is going on with the price of Bitcoin?
The price of Bitcoin is being the price of Bitcoin. It is always volatile. It is always going up and down. I was orange pilling a friend like 2 weeks ago, and I told him, listen, man, like, Bitcoin is volatile. It can go up $10,000 tomorrow, or it can go down $10,000 tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised either way, and it wouldn't really make a fundamental difference about what Bitcoin is. So when I said it can go down $10,000 tomorrow, I guess I was right. But then it went up $10,000 again, because it's up $10,000 from that point. So it's just if you want to have the best asset of all time, it's kind of the price you got to pay, a little bit of volatility.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it was a combination of, reacting to the stock market with the news of tariffs. But I think there was also some bullish news for Bitcoin specifically baked in there. We had the world's largest credit rating agency, S&P Global, basically coming out and saying Bitcoin is decentralized, geopolitically neutral, and a hedge against currency debasement. So I think more and more people are waking up to the fact that Bitcoin is a hedge against currency debasement, and it doesn't need favorable policies from one government to survive.
Yeah, no, and this Bitcoin price action just shows how fickle people can be about the price. My friend Daniel called me yesterday during work. I'm like, buddy, I'm actually doing something. What are you doing? You're the unemployed friend on a Wednesday afternoon. He's talking about, it's over. I'm going to sell my MSTR. I'm cooked. I'm on margin. I'm like, bro, I told you not to do that, but it's all good. Now today he's calling me. We are so back. So it's just, that's just how people are, man. And at the end of the day, the Bitcoin price is the Bitcoin price, but one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin, man. You got to understand that.
Yeah. We're going back and forth between it's so over and we're so back. Yesterday, my grandma literally phoned me and in the chat was like, so how's everything going with like your investments in Bitcoin and stuff with all the things that Trump is doing? And, and like literally the only time I'd ever mentioned that to my grandma was I was wearing this shirt and she asked me, who's Satoshi? And I was like, oh, it's Bitcoin. And she's like, oh, you're into that kind of stuff? And I was like, yeah, I think it's a good idea. That was it. So like she knew from there that, like, I guess, I don't know, she heard it on the CBC or something, the Canadian radio, that Bitcoin was doing something. So, it's in the mainstream a little bit now, where people are kind of waking up potentially to this idea that, that Bitcoin has some value and that people need Bitcoin, right? I don't know. It's pretty crazy. And I think the next story here kind of ties into it. We saw some massive swings again on the fear and greed index for cryptocurrency. So for anybody that doesn't know about this is a metric and basically a statistic that connects a whole bunch of different metrics and puts those all together. So each one of these has a certain weighting: volatility, market momentum, social media, dominance, trends, all have certain weighting in this index. You can even see yesterday was 18 and today is 39. So we went from extreme fear to relative fear. We're almost back at like the middle. So it's just like, this is kind of the indication of like the market can't really make up its mind right now. And this is just, again, another metric to show just how wild everything is going on in the market right now.
Yeah, and I think what was it? Sailor was saying, like, basically if everyone knew what I knew, like Bitcoin would be at 10 million. And I think that's just so true. Like the more and more people wake up to it, then that's just gonna dictate a lot.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Do you think this is a good trading metric or a good indication of what's going on in the market, this kind of index?
I like it. It helps me realize where the market's at, like from a psychological standpoint. But it also helps me understand a little bit what, I guess, to the extent that people don't understand Bitcoin, exactly as Josh was saying. The fact, if you are actually fearful for a situation like this, that is probably going to end up being very good for Bitcoin's price in the long run, then you really don't understand Bitcoin. So it just kind of shows how early we are. BTC Moon Guy says, when 10 million?
When 10 million? It's hard to say, but the truth is eventually, right? That'll always be a true statement. And then as for using the fear and greed index as a price indicator or a sentiment indicator, whatever it might be, it seems to be pretty accurate. Again, my friend was in extreme fear yesterday. It was pissing me off. But now everyone seems to be a little bit more comfortable. And I wouldn't trade based on that. I wouldn't sell because, we're in euphoria or whatever. You don't know how long euphoria will last. You don't know how long extreme fear will last. Extreme fear can last for 3 years during a bear market. You know what I mean? We just had a super long bear market. We might have a super long bull market, and you might sell because we're back at 150 and you think, it's game over. And then it goes all the way to 250, 350. You never know. So stack sats and hold on to it until you really need to use them.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to get on to the next news one here. But anyone in the chat, if you are asking questions, Tears of Kingdom, you asked a question. I've just started. I'm not going to bring it up yet. We're going to get to those after some of the news stuff. We'll let the questions build up. So don't be afraid to ask some questions, Bitcoin related, to any one of us. You can direct it or to the group at all. Gen Z is ready to to answer those questions. So this one's kind of interesting, and I kind of want to broaden this out a little bit. Tariffs, everybody's talking about tariffs, right? So this one here shows Bitcoin analysts optimistic as China surprisingly fixes yuan beyond 7.2 level. So for those that don't know, some foreign currencies have like a peg to the US dollar, and they can kind of move around on that peg. That peg isn't perfect. So what this is showing is that the peg, which has been, the 7.2 level has been considered sort of like a hard line in the sand for the Chinese currency, but now it's allowing it to move, which means that they're devaluating their currency compared to the US dollar. And maybe the reason, there's some speculation, but maybe the reason would be because of tariffs. If the yuan was a weaker currency, they could still export at competitive rates to the US market, even with the tariffs still being applied. So I think we should talk about this, and we should talk about just about like the effects of these tariffs. I know there's like, actually, I don't even know what the current news is with the tariffs. Did they get like revoked or what? I don't even know.
But there's a 90-day holding period.
Okay. So that's probably what the market, that massive uptrend of the market is because one person's words can now control the entire stock market, I guess. So what do you guys think about this? There's some, maybe people might consider this currency manipulation, but really it's just, those countries, those sovereign nations doing what they deem fit to stay competitive globally. What do you guys have to say about this news?
I mean, in terms of Bitcoin, this is another reason for everyone in China to buy more Bitcoin because Bitcoin won't devalue like the yuan. If China is out here saying we're going to make the yuan worthless and we're going to inflate it a lot and make it and take away all of its value, every single person in China right now should hear that, listen to what the government is saying, and say, hey, you can do that, but I'm not going to have my value in your currency, and I should be buying Bitcoin instead. And furthermore, that's more or less what the point of Trump making these tariffs for, or what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to devalue the dollar. If you listen to Jack Mallers, he describes it really well. But if the dollar is going to be devalued too, which it always is, buy Bitcoin.
I just want to welcome John on. John, we're talking, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the stream here. We're talking about this news article. I'll bring it back to stage here about the Chinese currency basically being allowed to slightly depeg from what it currently or what it's traditionally done, and they're devaluing it a little bit more than they used to in response potentially to the tariffs. The tariffs in broadly are what we're kind of getting onto this on as far as the subject.
For sure, man. I was listening on the way home in the car. So you guys are crushing it. Thanks for having me. I was just what Dan, I think you were just talking about. I think the one thing about that I think is super interesting is I just tried to make a video about this the other day. The guy Stack Hodler, if you guys follow that guy on Twitter, he put out a really good post basically about like the age of US treasuries as the global reserve asset. Is it over? And is everything going to be moving towards neutral global reserve assets, which is gold and Bitcoin? And I just made a video about this. Nobody watched it, so I'll just repeat it on here because it has like 70 views. So go watch that if you haven't seen it. But I'm like, that's where I stand. I listened to another pundit the other day who was basically saying the same thing of like, I'm going to rotate out of U.S. equities because he's worried about U.S. equity market because of all this tariff stuff and everything that's going on and currency devaluation. And his solution was, I'm going to start diversifying into equities in other countries. And I was like, no, exact wrong solution, bro. Don't go diversify into Latin America. You need to diversify into Bitcoin, dude. Like that's what people need to be doing.
Right. Yeah. That's super interesting. I mean, I don't really understand. Like, it seems like there's too many buyers of U.S. treasuries. Like at this point, it's like a negative real rate of return. You have the counterparty risk, like what happened to Russia with their U.S. denominated assets being seized when they invaded Ukraine. Like to me, that's a total red flag that you don't really own that. I don't know. To me, it's like, yeah, something decentralized that isn't controlled by a central organization that can be of value and can transfer value to other people that you're connected to, other nations. Like that just seems like such a useful tool that that all these nations need. It just seems inevitable to me. I mean, the more I think about Bitcoin, the more I just think, oh yeah, this is so inevitable.
If only we had a tool like that.
Yeah. What are you guys? Do you guys have any more thoughts on this subject?
I'm just interested to see like whether or not the U.S. is buying Bitcoin, because they said they're looking for budget neutral ways to acquire Bitcoin. If they're buying Bitcoin behind the scenes, they might be a lot more inclined to let the dollar fall. So I'm interested. I'm interested to see that.
However much they're buying, it's not enough to raise the price right now. So do we even know how much Bitcoin the government has? Wasn't there supposed to be an audit done by David Sachs?
They're 5 days, I think 4 or 5 days late on when they said that audit would be public. So I think it's embarrassing. I think it's embarrassing the amount they have. I think it's a lot less than they thought they had, and they're scrambling to figure out if there's any more that they haven't accounted for. They're hoping, but I think that's probably why they're reluctant to be public about it at this point.
Well,
they probably don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
But like, how can you not know? Like that is the embarrassing part right now. I would rather have a lower number than a I don't know number.
I think there's like they probably don't want to reveal the fact that they've been confiscating it. That's how they have all of it, right?
Right.
All the Bitcoin they have, they confiscated
So
at some point or another. That's the only reason they have it. And I think they've been confiscating it for years, but they probably didn't do a very good job of keeping track. But like the U.S. Marshals Service had a lot of it. Like they don't know how to self-custody. Is there some Bitcoin expert in the Marshal Service who's like good at self-custody? Like I just don't buy that they ever did a very good job of like keeping track of wallets and addresses and da-da-da. And they probably never went to Coinbase and was like custody this for us. Yeah. Right. Like I could be totally wrong, but it seems like that's probably why it's hard for them to audit it. Is like they might have had other law enforcement services just confiscating it. Maybe the FBI confiscated some, maybe the Secret Service has confiscated some, maybe like local law enforcement has confiscated some at police department levels, right? And they just don't even know where all of it is.
There could be some bad actors as well that could potentially, you know, throw that in a coin joiner, you know, buy some privacy coins with it or something and try to, you know, extract that out and obfuscate the trail. I mean, I don't know.
That happened with Silk Road, right? Those FBI agents got caught trying to steal the Bitcoin. Like, that's definitely not the only case of that happening.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Those agents just got a few years, so Ross got 2 life sentences.
Yeah, yeah. What do you guys think? So you mentioned tariffs. They got 90-day pause. To me, this whole downturn has been because of uncertainty in the market because of tariffs. There was there was some stuff going on as well with like some basis trade, some speculation about basis trades between, you know, of maybe hedge funds where they're buying spot treasuries and selling futures and getting the spread in between there. And they're maybe highly leveraged. And that would be why treasuries had that downturn, but then a rapid increase in price. And then the intra-bank lending rates were really high on the short term, which is another indicator. Like that was a indicator in 2008 when all these hedge funds were blowing up from their mortgage-backed securities, over leveraged on mortgage-backed securities. So I don't know. What do you guys think about all this? Do you think that maybe something behind the scene is blowing up that's causing the sale or like the yields on treasuries to go up? Or do you think maybe a foreign nation with a bunch of treasuries are dumping them? Like, why? Anybody got any thoughts on why the yields on these government bonds are going up?
I mean, you got me out of my depth a little bit here, man. Come on, let's be real. But I'll parrot some stuff I've seen on X. Why not, right? Yeah. Like last night I was in bed. I think this is what you're talking about. I was in bed and I saw everyone tweeting about how like, oh, the 10-year and the 30-year just spiked and are going crazy. And I was like, oh, I wish I was smart enough to understand what all this means. That would be awesome. But I think it's interesting, that like a lot of people think that Trump is trying to crash the markets to get treasury yields down to refinance all the debt. I don't know if I buy that. I've seen some other smart people say that's probably not true. But if that is what he's doing, he just had the opposite effect because treasuries just went up. The best, most credible response I've seen for why that probably happened was China, I think, apparently dumped like $50 billion worth of treasuries. And whether that's a tariff retaliatory
just like out of spite.
Yeah, exactly. Like I wouldn't be surprised. And if that's true, that's also a weird, like, why wouldn't we have seen that coming with all this tariff war stuff? It's like they hold like trillions of dollars worth of treasuries and they could just start dumping them and messing with us. So like that's another, like if we're playing 5D chess, we should have thought of that move. So that's above my pay grade, but it is super interesting to watch that stuff play out and be like, wait, why is the 10-year yield going crazy and all this stuff? Yeah.
I think it's pretty unpredictable. Like, you know, if their plan was to, you know, crash the stock market to get people to buy bonds, like that is one linear path, but like that can't be predictable. And like that isn't 100% guaranteed. So yeah, of course there's, you know, it's probably pretty likely that with that there would be some retaliation, not just with additional or with tariffs back, but yeah, I mean, dumping assets to hurt the bond market, knowing like the world knows that the US needs to refinance like $9 trillion this year. So it's pretty important for the US to bring rates down on all sorts of different bonds. Like short term would be helpful for them because they could refinance some short term, and long term would be really helpful for them because they could refinance long term. So yeah, I think their cards are pretty public. Like, it's pretty known what the US needs to do to fix a lot of things. And so it's pretty, when you know, if you're being attacked, right, it's a trade war, right? Like, the US is kind of attacking right now. If you're being attacked and you know what could hurt your enemy, it makes sense to maybe do an action that would hurt your enemy or the person you're in a war with. So I see that as a potential for sure.
Yeah, from a more higher level, I think what we're seeing is just one instance or one battle in like the very slow demise of the US dollar being the global reserve currency. I don't know how much longer the dollar is going to be the reserve currency for. But, take out all this financial engineering. Basically, we get a lot of advantage from, or the United States gets a lot of advantage from having the dollar be the main currency around the world. And other countries are losing out. And when the United States starts to look weaker, it incentivizes other countries to really go out and try to find alternatives that they're going to get more advantage from. So if you look at China is obviously going to try to push out the yuan as a world reserve, as the next world reserve currency. Russia is going to try and do their thing. The European Union is going to try and float the euro. Everyone's basically out for themselves. And regardless of how the treasury bills are working, that part I think about a little bit less. It's just more interesting to me what we're watching and what it means from the long run and what the ramifications of that are going to be. Because when the dollar stops being the global reserve currency, things are going to change. We're going to be able to, or we're not going to be able to export our inflation around the world in the way that we're doing today. The economy is going to be a lot worse. And I think Bitcoin is just kind of the life raft to help people out that are going to be hurt in that situation.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and I just think we're just at such a huge point here with Bitcoin. Like, we're talking about an asset that has the potential to be the global reserve currency. And like, people just aren't getting it yet. Like, people I talk to, like, they can't differentiate Bitcoin from a stock in their minds. It's just this thing out there that they want to buy, and people are buying to speculate that it's going to go up in value. But like, man, like, even if you think this asset has a 5% chance of becoming the global reserve asset in the future, like, you need to be allocating a percentage of your portfolio to reflect that. And 99% of people like won't even do that. So it's just so huge where we are right now, and people aren't seeing it yet.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so much of that. Like, I want to make like a rebuttal video every time I see that, which somebody who's like, I just did one recently, but somebody who's like analyzing Bitcoin like it's a stock. Oh, it has no cash flow, so it's a bad investment. You're like, how much time do you have for me to tell you like why you're just so off on the lens you're even using to look at it? And it's like, I think it's one of those things where the more sort of TradFi or traditional or value investing experience they have, the harder it is for them to zoom out and see. You're talking about like one money overtaking another money, which is a very different thing. That like the harder money sucks the value out of the weaker money. That's what history tells us. Now, you haven't studied history to understand that. You've just studied, what's a value investing model of analyzing cash flow, and that's how you analyze companies. And then you say, it has no cash flow, so therefore I can't value Bitcoin because I don't know how to calculate its value today based on all its future cash flows. And that's the only lens they can see it through. Therefore, it's not an investment. And then the even dumber conclusion is, therefore, it must be worth nothing.
Yeah. Gen Z, you have any thoughts on this?
Not too much. You guys already covered so much great stuff. And to be fair, I understand this stuff pretty well when I read it, but if I try to explain it, I'm just not at the level to make it really simple. But long story short, there's so much crazy financial engineering going on. There's the reverse repo market getting dried up. There's all this crazy stuff with bonds going up and down and peaking and troughing. And a lot of this stuff just shows that humans aren't exactly built to manage something as complex as an economy. And that's the reason why we rely on something like Bitcoin, which is mathematical, something that has rules without rulers. And it's not as easily fallible or tricked as a person with an ego or with an education, So at the end of the day, we can't control this level of complexity. And that's why we see things in the market break so easily.
Yeah, exactly. That sums it up really well. To me, it's like, the U.S. has benefited so much from having the reserve currency, and like Dan said, other nations, I'm sure, will try to fight for that privilege, and try to compete on that level. But it's also caused a lot of problems as well. It's gutted out the manufacturing base. It's basically created an import economy because the dollar is so strong, and then they export their debt. So it creates these deficits of them being a debtor nation, which of course has its advantages and disadvantages. They can export inflation as well because all these foreign debt holders, but they seem to not want to do that. Like, that's kind of what the rhetoric has been with this new administration, is they're kind of trying to control that, but they're working within this system that has been built up that doesn't have a strong foundation, and their money's not worth anything. So when the illusion becomes apparent enough to people that this is a giant illusion in a house of cards, they will look for something else, and something else has been built. And it was released on January 3rd, 2009, and it's called Bitcoin. This has been designed to solve all of the problems and be the neutral reserve asset, in my opinion. So it just makes sense to move to Bitcoin because the fiat system is broken. And as much as I think the current administration is trying to fix these issues, they can fix it's band-aid solutions to a terminal ill patient, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was a really good point for us. And I want to add on something you said about like the deficits, right? How the United States has a huge deficit. We are importing a lot of stuff and we're not exporting anything at all. I think the best analogy of why that is, and basically that's the way it's designed. And the best analogy to use is the Japanese invasion money that you just made a video about. Watch it if you haven't. It's on Forrest's channel. But in that situation, right? Basically, TLDR, Japan invaded different countries and they created a new currency in that system, right? And the whole point was that Japan could create a currency really, really cheaply, send it over to other countries, and extract the more valuable things for the worthless Japanese invasion currency money, right? That is exactly what the United States is doing. The whole point of us being the world reserve currency is that we can get money really, really cheaply and export it overseas so that we send them something cheap and worthless and they give us stuff valuable. That is what the trade deficit is. That is what this entire system was designed to do, was to exploit other countries for the benefit of the United States as a whole. Now, you're absolutely right that one of the trade-offs is that if we have the ability, or if a company has the ability to go to Vietnam or go to China and have somebody working really, really hard for 50 cents an hour, while someone in the United States is going to need $20 an hour to do that same job, no logical capitalist is going to pay the person $20 an hour when they could pay the person 50 cents an hour. And that's just kind of the trade-off that we get. And I think in the United States, a lot of people were hurt by that because it kept prices cheap, but they also lost their jobs as a result. So if we want to balance a trade deficit, what that really means, like in a perfect scenario, is that certain people in the United States are going to get their jobs back, which is really good, but those jobs are going to pay a lot less and they're not going to have the lifestyle that they used to have because of it. So a little bit explanation on what's happening and why it's happening.
Yeah, and it's like those jobs, I mean, yeah, right. So tariffs are to try to make foreign imports more expensive. How much more expensive can they make them before it becomes worth a company to manufacture them in the current nation instead of import them is the question and the variable. And at what point are people not even willing to buy those products because they're too expensive? A lot of stuff we buy it because of its price, and a lot of the labor that goes into that, a lot of the inputs that go into that, they're cheap because they're on subsistence wages, like they make absolutely nothing, and they probably don't conform with like the environmental regulation that we have here in in North America and all sorts of different stuff, right? And that's the reason they can make that stuff cheaper.
Exactly.
And it really doesn't make sense that we're trying to compete against that. Like what do we want to compete with? Like dumping sludge into the rivers and paying people like they're basically slaves? Like that's what we're trying to compete against. And then to compete against that, we have to create like government regulation, additional taxes, basically, to make everything so expensive that then we can compete against it. I don't know. The whole thing is just flawed, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just no, you're absolutely right. Everything you said. And it's just a repercussion of us having the world's reserve currency and seeing that break apart and seeing how we manage the distribution of wealth in this country it really just pisses a lot of people off, and they want to go back to the way things were. And unfortunately, no matter what happens, it's never going to go back to the way things were. Like the genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. So let's move on to this next topic here. This might be the last one. We got two. We'll see if we want to talk about the other one. So this one here, I mean, a little bit more maybe positive than it's a little bit depressing after a while talking about how the tariffs and the all that stuff. Pakistan turns to Bitcoin miners, AI data centers to use surplus energy. They actually tried to do this in, I believe, 2021 as well. There wasn't really much follow updates from mainstream news, but supposedly they are using Bitcoin mining and data centers for surplus energy on some hydro dams they have, which is really interesting to see. This being a country doing that, this could be a trend. You guys have any thoughts on Pakistan diving into this? Would be state-sponsored energy mining for Bitcoin.
Yeah, good for them. If I was Pakistan and I had the ability to make that decision, I would be doing the exact same thing. There's a lot of excess energy in the world. That energy is going to be the cheapest energy because it's just not being used, and there's no ability to transfer it other places. So all you have to do, if you're a Bitcoin miner and you want to be profitable, we kind of had this discussion last week, find the cheapest form of energy. The cheapest form of energy is energy that's being produced and not being used. So they're probably going to make a lot of money from it.
It should be the future of, like you said, every country should be doing it at some point. I don't know of a reason not to, right? If you just have cheap energy that you're not using, why wouldn't you monetize it? I mean, this is true of like oil companies who flare methane gas as a byproduct of oil refineries or whatever, like all these different things where we should be heading to a world where companies are just monetizing waste energy. I don't really know of a reason why they wouldn't be doing it. It's just maybe so far they just don't know, or they're just like, oh, it's just not enough profit for us to do it yet, or whatever. But yeah, I agree. It should be happening. And I do think that there's been a lot of energy FUD, obviously, about Bitcoin throughout its history. The narrative might be changing a little bit. There's people out there who are like fighting the other side of the narrative. Like Daniel Batten is like the number one guy that I know of who like talks about the energy piece a ton and just like espouses the energy benefits of Bitcoin and what mining actually does. This is another thing why like the Bitcoin rabbit hole just like never ends, where you're like, wait, you can monetize waste energy and therefore subsidize the build out of renewable energy projects that wouldn't normally be profitable, but because of Bitcoin mining, they are profitable. Like and that could revolutionize the energy grid and the way we build out new energy projects. Like, I'm not going to pretend to be like an energy expert, but like, that's crazy as one of the positive externalities of Bitcoin. And yeah, like you said, like more and more countries probably will start doing this because just free money, right? Like,
yeah,
hard money.
Absolutely. Free money, take it.
Yeah. Josh, you have anything to add there?
Not too much. I mean, I think you guys covered most of it, but it's great. Everyone should be doing it if you have the energy.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things is that people don't realize is how much waste energy is out there. I used to work for an energy company, and one of the things I learned was that in any city that you're in, basically wherever you are in the United States, in order to avoid like constant blackouts, we produce multiples more energy than we actually use. So if there is like 2 megawatts of energy being used, probably the energy generation service is probably creating like 4 or 6 or 8 megawatts of energy at that particular time. And it seems incredibly wasteful from like anyone's perspective, like that we're using so much more energy, but that's the price of having constant reliable electrical grid, right? So if you could use something like Bitcoin, use that energy, mine it, and then as soon as the energy needs to go somewhere else, just immediately turn off the energy grid or turn off the Bitcoin miners. It really just is a huge asset and can help build out energy infrastructure to the extent that I think most people just don't realize. So it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, so that's so interesting. So that's not even just excess energy from like a singular plant or a hydro dam. That's excess energy just on the grid for stable energy. And
Exactly.
when there's excess energy like that, there'd be times where they're trying to adjust that, and they might have the ability to shut down a plant, but or to start a plant, an energy generating plant. But that takes a lot more time to turn on and off than literally like an ASIC. There's not really any energy lost from turning off a Bitcoin miner. You had, while it was on, you had your attempts at guessing, your attempts at producing the next block. When you're off, you don't, but you don't have anything lost. That's the difference, I think, between maybe some AI data centers. Is a lot of those don't have the flexibility of being on and off. So even just the excess energy that's on all the grids around the world as they try to balance the grid could be used for Bitcoin mining. Not just single plants or a hydro dam here and there, but like every grid in every place could have Bitcoin miners help balance the grid, which would be a huge amount of hash power.
Yeah, and you said it absolutely perfectly. And my favorite hypothetical thought on this topic is that if that were to happen and Bitcoin miners are going out and using the electrical grid in exactly that same way, that the energy company obviously makes a whole lot more money, but hypothetically, they could use that money to subsidize energy costs in the future, making everyone's electrical bill way, way less. And I think if that were to happen, you would start to see a lot of people be very, very thankful for Bitcoin just because it brings their energy bills down.
Awesome. So everybody's had a chance to talk on this one except Gen Z, but I know he's in the chat arguing about socialism. We will get to that topic as well. Gen Z, do you have anything to talk on the mining front here before we move on to the next topic?
Not really. Keep on mining Bitcoin. It's very profitable if you can make it profitable, and hopefully we can get to all the stuff in the chat. We got like almost 100 people watching this. We need more people in the chat. All right, what are you guys doing? You shy? Come on now.
Coaxing them out. Okay, so last question here, or last news topic here before we get into it. So this week, so there's been a few misses here and there, but Michael Saylor and the team at Strategy did not buy Bitcoin. So this was published on April 7th. This is his only tweet from that day. Usually he publishes a tweet Sunday saying we need more green dots or orange dots or whatever. And that's indicating the fact that they are buying Bitcoin on the next day, or that they've bought it throughout the week and they're publishing the fact that they've bought in Bitcoin. I'll just say my quick thoughts on this before we get into it. And maybe we can just quickly talk about this one. I don't think there's that much we could go over on it. But to me, I was a little bit disappointed seeing this, not only because the price of Bitcoin has been low and that means they could buy more, But because they now have strategies that enable them to buy cheap Bitcoin when it's low, because their other strategies work a lot better when Bitcoin's price is actually going up, because it's dependent on their multiple to net asset value or their conversion premium. So they now have something called Strike, and they have an ATM on it. There is a conversion clause in there, so maybe that's why they haven't hammered it. Maybe there's not enough volume for them to sell more shares of this. But because it's a dividend kind of equity or a security, it does have the potential to be sold into a market that could absorb it even when the price of Bitcoin is lower. So I was a little bit surprised and disappointed they didn't do any of that this week to stack some cheaper sats. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on this. I know not all of us here talk that much about strategy, so I don't know if you guys have any additional thoughts on strategy not buying Bitcoin this week.
I guess my bigger question is, do you view it as a risk to strategy?
Do I view what? Them not buying Bitcoin as a risk?
Yeah, them not buying Bitcoin in this, in this bear market. Like, is that like a potential threat somewhere, or do you think it's just more of a blunder that Michael Saylor didn't take advantage of?
I think it's more of I think they're looking at what is the best option for them. So for some reason that it hasn't been a good option for them to buy it. And it could be that convertibility clause in Strike, or like I said, the lack of volume. If they had an ATM open on their Strife perpetual preferred, it doesn't have a conversion clause, and it acts a lot more like a traditional debt instrument. So when they have that, I think that they would implement that ATM a lot more in a downturn market. So to me, it doesn't seem like a risk. It just seems like honestly, it's probably that I'm missing something, or I don't have the full picture, and I don't have the full reason of why they're buying Bitcoin. That's what I see here.
You mean why they're not buying Bitcoin?
Sorry, Dan?
You said why they're buying Bitcoin. It's why they're not buying Bitcoin, right? Because they didn't buy Bitcoin.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I think from my perspective, still trying to expand my knowledge on strategy, but I think it's neutral at worst, right? Like them not accumulating more Bitcoin. Like right now, your shares are the same, an abstraction of the same amount of Bitcoin on the balance sheet. So you're not losing anything, and you're not getting diluted either. So I think it's neutral at worst.
Right. Yeah. There's literally nothing that's happened. Nothing's changed since the week before.
Josh, are you a big strategy investor?
I'm getting there.
You're getting there?
Yeah, not huge, but maybe like 5 to 10%.
John, what about you?
I have some, but I ask myself why sometimes. I asked Forrest this question when I interviewed him. Like,
for the gains, bro.
Well, yeah, I mean, if they're bigger than Bitcoin, then that's why I have some. We'll see. But I don't know. I think I just was like, we get desensitized to the volatility of Bitcoin. If you hold Apple for a while, and then Bitcoin is crazy volatile compared to that. But then if you hold Bitcoin for a while, you're like, that meme where he's like looking at it, poking with a stick, and he's like, do something, and then the green laser shoots through his face. But so I don't know. I think it just like, was like, oh, this will be fun to just like put some money in strategy. Sometimes it's like you don't really understand the thing until you actually have some skin in the game. You're watching the price, and then you're like, okay, I'm starting to understand it more, or it motivates you to like do a little bit more work to better understand it. So yeah, I mean, like I'm super interested in like what strategy is doing, and I do own some, and I don't understand it nearly as much as I have spent the time to understand Bitcoin itself. Right? I don't have the conviction. I don't have the same amount of conviction in strategy just from the sheer fact that I haven't done as much work to understand it as much. Yeah. But I do know that like those like the MSC are like True North guys. Like, I mean, they think that this is just like the smartest thing that's ever happened in the history of finance. So I'm like, A, on one hand, I'm like, that's fascinating. And B, on the other hand, I'm like, I get nervous that they have such strong conviction that it's the right thing and that nothing could possibly go wrong. I'm like, I don't know enough to know what the risks are that I'm not seeing.
Yeah, excellently articulated. That was great.
I think they have really strong conviction because they understand businesses, and when you look at the balance sheet and what strategy is doing, they're actually incredibly strong. When all of this stuff is coming out, the debt load of all these zombie companies is really crazy, and people really worry in Bitcoin about Strategy's debt level, but their balance sheet is incredibly strong because they held so much Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin is worth so much compared to their debt. So, I mean, that is why, and they've been successful in acquiring a lot more Bitcoin, and even with the dilution, still using that metric of Bitcoin per share, increasing that amount. So, I think, yeah, I mean, they come at this not from just a pure Bitcoiner lens, but they come at it from a TradFi Bitcoiner lens, which I think is why they're so interested in it.
Yeah,
in my
and
opinion.
then they're addressing these markets in traditional finance, like the bond market, $300 trillion market that no one else is touching. Sailors laying out the playbook saying, come on guys, do this, and they're the only ones doing it, and they're doing it at scale. And like with the Strife, I believe the new bond offering, like they're addressing a $300 trillion bond market that no one else is has the competitive advantage of Bitcoin to address. So yeah.
Let's finish this one up here. I don't know, I just maybe heard somebody. Did somebody else have something to say here?
Oh, I mean, as this will take it in a slightly different direction, but so don't pick up this volley if you don't want to. But what I'm interested in it partially is like MSTR probably is like going to do fine with this strategy. I'm curious if this Bitcoin treasury company thing will become sort of the ICO fad, the NFT fad, like one of the next in the string of these things that pop up in crypto, where like more and more companies will start to do this. And if they do it less responsibly or with more leverage or whatever, one of the next, companies who does it, if we see 100 or more, doing it, one of them might get like totally blown up. Or if too many of them start doing it, what does that do to the overall leveraging system and all that, right? Like once one person's doing it, it's like less crazy. But if lots and lots and lots of them start doing it, then you kind of get this like froth in the system that feels dangerous.
Well, what's interesting is I mentioned the debt levels to the net asset value of Strategy is really conservative, right? So one way you could try to be, to outperform them is by putting on more leverage than Strategy does, and leverage is risk. So you could see potential. I have no fear of Strategy specifically, but you could see some of these new companies come in and really guns ablaze and really take on a lot of leverage, acquire a ton of Bitcoin in a short time, and really outperform all these other ones. And people get so stoked on it, and boom,
somebody's going to do that. It's a guarantee.
Yeah, I think it probably is. I'm seeing some responsibility with the ones that are doing it currently. I've been keeping a close eye on the Bitcoin treasury companies, but it's only a matter of time before somebody comes in like that, I think.
Yeah. Not your keys, not your coin. I'll just throw that in there.
Well, that's always true. That's always true. Yep.
And last thing before we get to questions, because we only got about 10 minutes. Anytime Strategy is not buying Bitcoin is because they did not want to further hinder the stock price, typically, because most of their value creation comes from issuing shares, aka selling shares. That's the ATM. And if they're not buying Bitcoin in scale or in size, they probably didn't hit the ATM that hard. And that's because the market conditions did not allow them to do so. So if it's a really red day, they don't want to hurt the common stock shareholders, because without them, there is no options market. There is no leverage market. There is no Strife. There is no STRK. There's none of that, so the common stock has to perform somewhat, right? There needs to be some up and downside volatility. If there's nothing but downside, they're probably not going to buy. But after a crazy day like this, let me tell you something. They will be buying this Sunday. You already know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good insight that I didn't expand on. So for me, I knew why they didn't push the ATM on the common. I was surprised they didn't push the ATM on Strike. But again, I think you're probably right, where the market conditions were not right for even that, because it has that convertibility clause. But that wouldn't have affected necessarily the common stock price. But yeah. All right, so let's get into some questions, everybody. This has been really awesome. This has been really great. Yeah, we only. Wow, I mean, we talked a lot here.
Yeah, I want to
we
keep
gotta
going.
we gotta speed run these. If
We
we're
gotta
gonna do the questions, everyone's got to say their one little sentence. We can't
Yeah.
exactly extrapolate everything we want to say, but just hit it real quick. Let's go.
Yes, agreed. Okay, what Bitcoin price should I sell my MSTR stocks? Of course, none of what we've been talking about has been financial advice, but we can maybe talk about this personally. What Bitcoin price would you want to hit before MSTR, is a price that, I guess it really depends on what your cost base is, what your goals are, what you would roll that into. I mean, this question depends on so much, to be honest.
Yeah,
Personal decision, dog. Sorry, that's a personal decision.
Yeah.
$4,000.
Hey, I've heard crazier. That's not that wild, to be honest.
I don't say this to be a jerk. If you don't know the answer to that question, you haven't studied enough. That's usually my thing for yourself. Like, you have to know the answer for yourself. You can't, you know what I mean? Nobody else can answer that for you, right? Like, what are your goals? How much money you want to make off of it? Like, how afraid are you of the risk? Like, how nervous do you get when it goes up? Like, I don't know. How allocated are you, right? Are you going to get, are you going to make a life-changing amount of money if it goes 2x? Then yeah, sell.
Totally. Yeah, and maybe, dollar cost average out. It would be a strategy as well. As it goes up and into profit, just take some profits and move it into something different if you're not long-term convicted. Here's another question here. So this is a little bit more interesting in my opinion. I'm 51 with 5% of 1 BTC. If anyone wants to do the math on the amount of sats, if I hold, there we go. If I hold for 10 plus years, do you think BTC will be at least 3 million or more? Do you think Bitcoin will be worth 3 million or more in 10 plus years is the question.
The plus there is kind of the caveat. So obviously, yes.
Sure. Yeah.
But will it be $3 million in 10 years? I would say probably not. When I got into Bitcoin, it was around $2,000. That was
we got a bear in the call here.
Well, let's think about this, right? If the Bitcoin price went to $3 million in 10 years, what that probably implies is that something really, really bad happened with the United States economy and the US dollar. And that's a world I don't really want to be living in. Sure, could the dollar blow up next year due to some crazy trade issues and the dollar is no longer the world reserve currency. Everyone's using Bitcoin. The Bitcoin price is at $10 million and but the dollar is only worth like a fraction of what it's worth today. Yeah, it could happen, but I don't think it'll happen, nor do I want it to happen. I think let's go slow and steady. Bitcoin's going to probably outpace every other asset. I don't think it's really that productive to be focusing on a specific price point. Just, is it outpacing everything else? And the answer is absolutely.
I think a good measure of like growth for Bitcoin is not fiat price, but like percentage of total global assets. I think that's more of a metric to see kind of how Bitcoin is eating into other things. Like, we have no idea how much 3 million US will even be worth, how much it's going to buy. So like measuring it in that way just doesn't really, you're probably not thinking about it the right way.
Great point, Josh.
I would say I have no idea what the price will be, right? I mean, I hope. I think 10 years, 3 million. I think if it's under that, I'll be disappointed. I'll go on a record. No, I'm just kidding. But I don't know, but it's super fun to play with it. And there's a few different ways to do it. But one is Unchained has this great retirement calculator. Have you seen that? Where like you can go plug in and play with the different assumptions of like what the compound annual growth rate will be, whatever. It's super fun to just play with the different assumptions of like what that can be. And you're like, well, what would I be worth if it did this? And I think it's more fun to look at to analyze the different potential compound annual growth rates that it could have than to just like try to target a number. Because if you're like, oh, well, if it, it's historically done 50 or 60 CAGR per year, even if this is what Saylor's whole 13 million in 20 years whole thing, right, was based off of, is like, he has his own projection of what the CAGR will be going forward in the future based on what it's been in the past. And if it slowly diminishes and then I think like flattens out at like 20% a year or something. This is sort of his assumption. That'll get us to 13 million BTC in 20 years or whatever. It's fun to play with. Well, what if he's wrong? What if he's bearish? What if he's bullish? Like go do that for yourself and just kind of understand the different scenarios and what they look like for your portfolio. But I think, who knows in terms of what it'll actually be.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
I say it'll be higher. Chainlink is garbage. Don't do that. All right, let's move on to the next question. We got 5 minutes. Let's go. Speed.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we have a couple questions here, but let's get to this one. There's been a lot of chat a lot of people in the chat talking about socialism versus capitalism.
Just one person.
Yeah, one person.
Yeah.
Getting it mixed up with capitalism and colonialism. They're mixing definitions here. They're getting all over the place.
I don't want to waste a lot of time with this. This person is not a troll. This is a serious person, I guarantee you, and that's okay. Long story short, at the end of the day, in a socialist system, in a capitalist system, in a communist system, money is controlled by a central issuer. This is a true statement. If you read Marx, they talk about how it's really important to have a central bank and a central issuer of money, right? And when you do that, you distort prices, you distort the free market. And in the case of, let's say, all apples are free under communism, whatever. The person who is the farmer, right? You're actually stealing value from them. That's tyranny on the part of that person, but it's free for everyone else who's not doing that work. So again, Tuttle Twins has awesome episodes on this. There's plenty of writings on this. And because we live in such distorted markets, it's hard to compare and contrast. But at the end of the day, you do not own your work in socialism or communism or in capitalism. You can only own your work with something like Bitcoin. And that's why it's a paradigm shift.
Do you guys think that Bitcoin is capitalism? I
think that the words capitalism and socialism mean so many different things to different people. It's hard to even, it's impossible to say, because to some people capitalism means X, but to other people capitalism means Y. And I just don't like those words in general. I just think that they're not very productive or not very helpful in explaining things.
I think there's a lot of anger these days at capitalism. You see people blaming capitalism for the ills of our monetary system. I think that anger at capitalism is not for capitalism. It should be directed at the money printer. Like, if we can get all the people who think capitalism is the problem to realize capitalism's not the problem, the money printer is the problem. The fact that they can just print money out of thin air and fiat's worthless, that's the problem. So like the fact that we have a central bank can just create money out of thin air and we're supposed to think that's a good thing. That's what's distorting everything, that you think the problems that you're pointing at capitalism and saying, well, those are the distorted incentives. No, those distorted incentives come from the fact that the government has a money printer.
Yeah, fully agree.
And then last thing before we move on off of this topic, because this is an episode by itself, you have to imagine someone as innocent as like a wine producer, right? They crush grapes in their backyard. They sell you wine. They can make a fortune doing that if they have enough people who love their product. Doesn't necessarily make them evil. They have to become evil and start stealing once they realize, oh my gosh, I'm getting debased by the government. They keep printing money. I can't sell my product for the price that I was selling it at. Now I have to start hiring a bunch of illegal immigrants in order to work in my backyard, and then they crush the grapes, and I don't pay them an actual wage. I pay them a very cheap wage because their currency is actually much worse than mine, and then you start to outsource it to other countries, and then you rip those guys off because their currency is really weak and you have the strong currency, and like all your perverse incentives stem from the money itself. So again, that's a whole episode. I say let's move on, but honestly, thank you to this guy for bringing this up.
Yeah. My thoughts are that these are a distraction from the real problem. I mean, capitalism, socialism, politics, all this stuff is just to divide people into thinking, socialism is a good idea because we're helping the less fortunate. Capitalism is a good idea because we can pull ourselves up from the bootstraps. None of this works if the money's broken. That's it. We got to fix the actual problem, and then we can go over the details after that. These are minute details, in my opinion, and none of them will actually work anyway if the money's broken.
Yeah,
agreed.
Like that website, like WTF, happened in 1971, where you just see every measurable metric of like a good life just has gone down the tubes since we went off a hard money standard, like from health to just every social issue, and people aren't looking to that as the problem.
Yeah.
I think we got 45 seconds. What's the last question for us?
I think I think that was it. I mean, this question here, will the next halving have a big impact on the Bitcoin price? I think the halvings have had less of an impact every time, but of course, this is less supply. The halvings basically make it a lot more expensive for miners. So that is an input to price going up because miners have to remain profitable. I think it'll have less of an impact, but still have a big impact. Before we go, though, guys, and you guys can talk on that too. We can maybe go over a little bit. Just wanted to shout out each one of your channels again. We got Josh from WorkSave Bitcoin and Gen Z BTC. We got John from My Favorite Thing About Bitcoin and Dan from Bitcoin Reactions. And I will post all of your guys' links in the description after we could end this call. So if anybody's watching this on the replay, they'll be there. And just make sure you check them out. They all make really great Bitcoin content out there. So thanks, guys, for being on the show. I don't know if you want to, maybe we can end it with just a little talking here on the Bitcoin halving.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing right now with this halving is that it didn't go as expected. It didn't go like the rest of the halvings. So my expectation is that trend will probably continue. The halving won't matter.
I think that probably makes sense that it'll matter less and less because the block subsidy is exponentially smaller, such that the halving of it makes less of a difference potentially. But there is that interesting relationship of how the price sort of has to keep up with. I think there's a little bit of an interesting chart looking back, like the price, the block subsidy representing a relatively similar amount in dollar terms as the dollars go up, even though the subsidy goes down. And I think that to some degree that does have to continue for, like you said, the miners to remain profitable. So there's an interesting sort of cyclical and incentive structure built in there. It's interesting to see if it still plays out. I mean, I mostly subscribe to the people who say like the cycle works until the cycle breaks. Like at some point, it's probably not, just for the fact that people think it's a cycle. Their psychology will play out such that they trade it, and eventually the cycle will break, because if it just kept working, everybody would catch on to that and it wouldn't keep working that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy until it's not. And then it becomes a profitable strategy to trade against and counterintuitive. So yeah, when does that happen? It's anybody's guess, right? Yeah. All right, guys. That's about it. I got to go. I got to run to a Bitcoin meetup. Thank you all for being here. And Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we do these live streams. It's rotating guests here. It's open on the YouTube Bitcoiner chat that I've got going on. So a few people could join, and we'll see who comes on each week. Thanks everybody in the chat for your questions. Thanks guys for showing up today and bringing all the heat and bringing all the great answers. Appreciate you all.
Yep. Thank you guys so much. Uncle Luke, stop crying, bro. Come to my channel. It's all good. We can continue the discussion. It's all good. Anyway, thank you guys so much. We need more of that in the chat. Maybe not exactly that, but more talking, So thank you guys.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks,
see you guys.
Thanks.
See ya.
Yes.